Welcome! In this video, we'll solve a complete Sudoku puzzle using the scanning technique we learned in Lesson 1, plus another simple technique called counting. Let's have a look at this easy level puzzle from the New York Times. We can start by either scanning across the big rows of ranks, first the top, then the middle, and then the bottom rank, and then we can scan across the big columns of stacks, left, center, and right. You don't have to scan by rows and columns as I show you here. You can also start scanning with the number 1, then move on to look for the number 2, and so on until you get to the number 9. That works too. Either way, we're looking for numbers we can easily place. So in this lesson, I'll scan across and then down. So let's start with the top rank. Looking across the top rank for numbers that repeat themselves twice, we see that the number 1 already appears 3 times, so that number is done. On to the number 2, we see it appears twice, once in block 2 and once in block 3. So there needs to be a number 2 in block 1, and where can it go? Well, the only place it can go is in row B, since rows A and C already have the number 2, and only column 1 is free in row B, block 1. So the number 2 must go here. Now, moving on to the next number, the number 3 only appears once. The number 4 only appears once. There is no number 5. 6 appears once. 7, same. 8, we already have 3 8s. And the number 9 appears only once. So we've done as much as we can with the top rank. Let's move on to the middle rank. Realize while I'm doing this that there are other ways to solve this puzzle, but this lesson is a demonstration of the scanning technique, so that's what I'm doing here. Later lessons will use other techniques as we build on this one. Okay, the middle rank, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, 6 is repeated twice, here in block 5 and block 6. So that means we need to find where the 6 goes in block 4. And since the 6's appear in rows E and F, then the missing 6 must be in row D. And there's only one cell open in block 4, row D, and that's here, so the 6 must go here. Next, 7. 7 is repeated twice, here in block 4 and here in block 6. So where in block 5 will it go? It can't go in rows E and F, so it must be placed in row D, and the only open cell for it to go in is here, row D, column 4. Next, the number 8. It already appears 3 times, so moving on to the number 9, we see it appears twice in blocks 4 and 6. So it must be placed in block 5, somewhere in row E, since rows D and F already have 9 in them. But where in row E? Well, we can't know for sure right now. It can either go here in row E, column 4, or here in row E, column 6. Normally, we would pencil mark those numbers in to remind us where the 9 might go. These are called candidates, but I'll leave the pencil marking for another lesson. So let's leave it alone without putting in the pencil marks. So now we're ready to move down to the bottom rank. Okay, we have a 1 and a 1. So that means this block 8, needs a 1. And where would it go? Well, it can't go in this row because there's already a 1 here. And it can't go in this row since there's a 1 here. So it must go in this row, row G, in one of these 2 cells. Can we figure out which of these 2 cells? Well, we could stop and move on to the next number if we're just looking across the ranks, but we can also look up, and if we look up column 4, we see there's already a 1 in column 4. So the 1 can go in column 5 here, and in fact this is the only place in block 8 that the 1 can go. Make sure you see that. So pause this video and look at this block more carefully just to make sure that you do see that. Okay, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. 6 is repeated twice. So we have a 6 here in block 7 and 9. So we need to place a 6 in block 8, and the only place it can go is in row G, since we already have 6s in rows H and J, and the only open cell in block 8, row G, is here. There are no other numbers that are repeated twice. The number 9 is repeated 3 times, once in each block. So now we're done with the ranks, the big groups of rows. So let's take a look at the big groups of columns we call stacks. Starting with the left stack, let's see if there's a number that repeats itself twice. And we see the number 2 is here in block 1, and again here in block 4. So we need to place a 2 somewhere in block 7. So there has to be a 2 either here or here. And if we're just looking at the left stack, we can't place the 2, but if we look across the rows, we can see there's already a 2 in row J. So now the only place a 2 can go in this block is here, row G, column 3. The next number that repeats itself twice in this left stack is the number 7. And so we can see it needs to be placed somewhere in block 1, but where? Well, column 1 already has a 7, and column 3 already has a 7, so it has to go here in column 2. And the only cell open in column 2 is here. So this is where we can place the number 7. All right, what about the number 8? Well, 8 is repeated here and here. So we need to place an 8 somewhere in block 7. And since there are 8s already in columns 1 and 3, it needs to go in column 2 in one of these 2 open cells. I can't eliminate either of those cells since there are no 8s across the rows. And in later lessons, I'll show you that you can pencil in those 8s in those 2 cells so that later, if you eliminate one cell, you'll know that an 8 goes in the other cell. But let's leave that for a later lesson and leave these cells empty. All right, the number 9 appears 3 times, so now we're done looking at the left stack and we can move on to the middle stack. Starting with the number 1, we see a 1 in block 2 and a 1 in block 8. So we know that we need to place a 1 in this block, block 5, and it can go in either of these 2 cells in column 6, since columns 4 and 5 already have 1s in them. Then looking across the rows, we see there's already a 1 in row E, so that eliminates this cell, and so the 1 has to go here. Moving on to the number 2, we have a 2 here and a 2 here, so this block needs a number 2. And since there are 2s in columns 5 and 6, it has to go in column 4, and the only open cell in this block in column 4 is here, row E, column 4. So that's where the 2 goes. Hopefully you're catching on to the scanning method and you can see how easy this method is. Obviously you can't completely solve most puzzles using only this method, but it certainly helps to fill in some of the empty cells to get the ball rolling. The next number we can place is a 5. We have a 5 here and here, so the 5 must go here. Next is the number 6. It appears here and here, so we need to place it somewhere here in block 2. And since the 6 is in columns 4 and 5, it must go in column 6 in one of these 2 cells. But looking across the rows, we see there's already a 6 in row A, so the 6 must be placed in row B, column 6, and that is here. Moving on, 7, there is only one 7. 8, we have 2 8s, so we need an 8 in this block, and since there are already 8s in columns 4 and 6, it must go in column 5, and the only cell open in this block in column 5 is here, so this is where the 8 goes. Now at this point I want to introduce you to a new technique called counting. Whenever you see a unit, either a block, a row, or a column with 8 of the 9 numbers already filled in, then you can just count to see what number is missing. Here in block 5 we see that 8 of the 9 numbers are already filled in, so we just need to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The 9 is missing, so we know the number that needs to go into this empty cell is a 9, and now block 5 is done. Now we can continue scanning, or we can use counting if we notice that column 4 is also almost complete, 8 out of the 9 cells, so we can easily count and figure out what number is missing. I'm going to continue with scanning. In Sudoku solving, you can follow different paths to get to the same end, so let's continue on here for the time being with scanning. We see we have 2 9s in this middle stack, one in block 8 and one in block 5, so we need to place a 9 somewhere in block 2, and where would that go? Well, it needs to go in column 5 since columns 4 and 6 already have a 9 in them. And in column 5 there are 2 cells empty, in row A and in row B, but since there's already a 9 in row A, then the 9 must go in row B. And now we've finished scanning for all the numbers in the middle stack, and it's time to move on to the right stack, and we can do that. But as you get more practice with Sudoku, you'll realize that when we place numbers in a block using one technique, it often has ramifications on other numbers as well. For example, we just placed the 9 here in block 2, and if you remember earlier when we were looking across the ranks, we didn't even try to place the number 9 because it only appeared once in block 1, but now it appears twice, and so now if we were looking across the ranks, we could place the 9. So whenever you place a number, it's a good idea to look back and see if it has any ramifications for the other blocks, or you can ignore it and continue scanning down the stacks. But now, since we have 2 number 9s, we can look to see if we can place the third number 9 somewhere in block 3, and yes, we can. It has to go somewhere in row C, since rows A and B already have 9s in them, and so it must be placed into one of these 2 cells in block 3. Now, looking down, we see that column 8 already has a 9 in it, so the 9 has to go in column 7. Alright, let's move on to the right stack. Starting off with the number 1, we see the number 1 repeats itself in block 3 and again in block 9, so we need to place a 1 somewhere in block 6. And since there is already a 1 in columns 8 and 9, it has to go in column 7 in one of these 2 cells, but since there is a 1 already in row F, it has to go here in row D, column 7. 2 doesn't repeat. 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 is repeated twice, here in block 6 and in block 9, so we need to place it somewhere in block 3, and since the 6 is in columns 7 and 9, it must be placed somewhere in column 8. All 3 cells are open in block 3, column 8, but if we look across the rows, we can see 6s in rows A and B, so it has to go in row C, column 8, right here. Next is the number 7. It's repeated twice, once in block 3 and again in block 6, so it needs to be placed in block 9, either in row G or in row J. And if I look across rows G and J, I can't see another 7 in those rows. Yes, I see 1 in row H, but that doesn't help me to eliminate the 7s from row G or H, so I'm going to leave that alone for now. Remember, I said I'm not doing any pencil marking in this example. We'll leave that for a later lesson. Moving on to the number 8, it's repeated twice, here and here, so it also needs to be placed in block 9, and this we can place easily. It has to go in column 8, and the only cell open in column 8 in block 9 is here, so the 8 must go here. The number 9 already appears 3 times, so now we're done scanning the big groups of columns called stacks. Now we can go back and rescan since more opportunities have opened up as we placed more and more numbers, or we can move on to the counting method if it's available to us, and it is. Remember, if you see a unit that's a row, a column, or a block that already has 8 numbers in it, it's a simple matter to deduce what that missing 9th number is by just counting. But we can also use counting when there is more than just 1 cell remaining. Let's take a look here at block 2. There are 2 cells that are still empty, and let's see what is missing by counting. Yes, I see that column 5 already has 8 numbers, and we can get the missing number more easily for column 5. But this is a learning video, so let's see if we can deduce the missing numbers when 2 cells are empty just by counting. So what are the 2 numbers missing in block 2? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 4 is missing. 5, 6, 7, and a 7 is missing. So we're missing the 4 and 7 from this block. Can you pause this video and figure out where the 4 and the 7 must go in row A? Either in column 5 or in column 6. Okay, look down column 5 and you see there is already a 4 in column 5, so the 4 can only go in column 6. So we place it here, and then the 7 has to go here. Let's go back and rescan the top rank. We're done with the numbers 1 and 2. They are already placed in each of the top 2 blocks. Now here is the number 3. It only appears once. Can we figure out where it goes in block 1? Yes, we can. Do you see it? There are 3 cells open in block 1, but since there is already a 3 in row C, 2 of those cells can be eliminated, and so the 3 can only go here in row A, column 3. And now we place the remaining 3 in block 3. It has to go in one of these 2 empty cells, and it can't go in row A. We already have a 3 in row A, so it must go here in row B. And now we can use the counting method on block 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is missing, so the 5 goes here. Okay, back to block 1. We have 2 empty cells, and what's missing? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is missing, but I can't eliminate one of the cells. The 4 can either go here or here. 5 is missing, so it's the 4 and the 5 that are missing, and I can't place either of them, so I'm going to leave that alone for now. Remember, pencil marking will be in the next video, so we'll leave that alone for now. Let's move on to this middle rank. We have 3 ones. 2, we need to place a 2 in block 6, and it can go here in row F, columns 7 or 8, since rows D and E already have 2's in them. And then looking up, we see column 7 already has a 2 in it, so the 2 must go here in column 8. Moving on to the number 3, nothing I can do there. 4, okay, so the 4 here eliminates any 4 in row E. So in this block, the only place a 4 can go is here, row F, column 2. And now for row F, we can use the counting method, since there is only 1 cell left empty in row F. So counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is the number that's missing, right? Let's move on to the bottom rank, and we have 3 ones. 2, 2 here, 2 here, so there needs to be a 2 here in block 9. And since we already have 2's in rows G and J, the only place a 2 can go is here in row H, column 9. 3, we have only 1 3, 4, no 4's, 5, we only have 1 5, 6, we have all 3 6's, 7, only 1 7. But if you look across to this block, block 8, you can see that the 7 in row H eliminates these 2 cells and leaves only this cell open for the 7. And now looking across to block 9, we can see that the 7 must go in row G, and column 9 already has a 7 in it, so the 7 must go here in column 7. 8, we have an 8 here and an 8 here, so the third 8 must go here. And 9, we have all the 9's in this bottom rank. Okay, let's move back to counting and look for units with 8 cells already filled in. Look here at row G. You can see there's only 1 number missing, and using counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, we can see it has to be the number 4 that's missing, so that goes here, and row G is done. Now looking around for another opportunity, we see that column 7 has 1 cell missing. 1, 2, 3, it's the number 3. Column 8 has 1 empty cell. Using counting, we can see that it's 1, 2, 3, 4. The number 4 is missing. Now row D is missing one number, 1, 2, 3, it's the number 3. Column 4 is also missing just one number, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's the number 4. And column 6 is also missing one number, it's 1, 2, 3, the number 3. And looking across, we see row H is missing a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now column 2 is missing a 1, 2, 3, the number 3. I wonder if we can finish the rest of the puzzle just using counting. Row E is missing a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now column 1 is missing a 1, 2, 3, it's missing a 4. And now this 3 by 3 block is missing just one number, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's the number 5. And so that completes the block and also the row at the same time. Look down here at block 7, we also have just one number missing from this block and also one number missing from column 3. Obviously it's the same number, so we can either count the numbers in the block or count the numbers down the column and we get the same answer. 1, 2, 3, 4, right, and that also completes the column with a 4. And now there's just one cell left, and that's here. And for this I can either count the block or the row or the column for the missing number. Counting the block, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the number 5 that's missing. You can see the 5 is missing from the block, the 5 is missing from the row, and the 5 is missing from the column. So that's the correct number. You see how everything fits nicely and neatly together? If it doesn't fit, then you made a mistake along the way. That's it for lesson 2. You learned 2 very important beginner methods that even expert solvers use to get a puzzle started. Stay tuned and subscribe for upcoming lessons. If you stick with this series, you will build your skills to the point of being able to solve more and more challenging puzzles. Thanks for watching. Bye.